So today we're going to be talking about the Gershwin Preludes, and I think that these pieces have always kind of been my first love of Gershwin. I didn't actually know the Rhapsody in Blue until after I learned these Preludes, and I was asked to learn these to perform for Peter Nero many years ago when I was in high school. And I remember being very intimidated. I thought I could play these for Peter Nero. So I got a lot of help with it from my teacher at the time, David Brown. And it was a wonderful journey. And these three pieces, I didn't realize just how classically formed they are until rather recently. It's a little embarrassing. I'm afraid to say I can't believe it took me that long. But they're really structured in a kind of formal way. The first one's structured in ternary form and very tightly so. But before we get into the details of it, these three preludes, he originally intended them to be 24. And that's kind of like the Chopin preludes, right? He wrote 24 of those. And that seemed to be a kind of popular number for the preludes. And I just think that it's interesting that it ended up being only three, 24. And he wrote several more. He wrote about 7, then he clipped those down to 5. And then he clipped them down to 3 eventually. I have some of the other of his preludes. I think these are probably these 3. It's a nice set. And it also kind of implies a sort of sonata or sonatina form, which I really like in a classical sense. Of course, he blends it with a wonderful combination of, diverse jazz rhythms and delicious, ninths and 11ths and all those wonderful harmonies. They were first published in 1926, and I believe this was after Rhapsody in Blue. I think several of you have probably seen my Rhapsody in Blue presentation. It was a live musings I did back when we did live events back at Newman University last June. So if you have a chance to check that out, you can do so. It's on my YouTube channel. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. I love how it begins. It just begins with this kind of outright, bold statement. And then he waits. He writes a little fermata on that. And then it's just one note difference, B flat to A flat. Okay, and it's just right hand by itself. So it's almost like, the beginning of Rhapsody in Blue, we start with single instrument. So I like how he implies it's like, here's our solo instrument. So it's sort of like the intro. A little more flirtatious. And then he jumps right in with this rhythm. So 4 bars of that. And it's very jagged. Bump, bum, and that's called syncopation, right? When you have the emphasis is not on the downbeat. So you have the downbeat here and then. So it's a jagged rhythm and it gives us a lot of energy. And I think it just sets us off in a really great mood. Then he brings in what we call, I say, the A theme, okay? And this is what we're going to get into with the ternary form stuff. Here's our theme. Okay, that by itself, we have a nice, kind of rhythmical rhyme to it. And then he takes those 2 16th notes and 8th, for those of you that have the music with you. So he kind of accelerates the rhythmical gesture instead of dee-da-da-da-dum. And the rhythm kind of rolls along a little bit more until he goes. He has that little nudge in there. Syncopation and rolling along. And then the left hand, of course, is keeping up with this. So that's certainly a really important feature of the piece. So that's our background, aside from the solo instrument. And then he has a little, kind of A1, you could say, I guess. Again, thinking about the classical style, we have a sequence here. Here's your pattern. Right? And all the while, your left hand's doing this. Now, without the grace note, it would sound like this. It's nice, but it's always these little touches, these little features that Gershwin adds. So that little nudge forward. It's amazing what a half step can do. It's just a half step grace note there. Hear that syncopation, left hand. And I think we're going to call this the B section here. We start something very different. Okay, so what is he doing here? A little different with the rhythm. Instead of having a lot of jagged rhythms with the right hand, it's streams of 16th notes. So there's your harmony there, and then he has these kind of surprising, full of dissonance, but they're very juicy chords. And he starts piano, and he kind of lets the tension rise up, and it seems like something bad's going to happen, but he lets us rest on this lovely kind of C major implied. I should call that a ninth chord. You know, I don't know as much about jazz theory as some people, but I believe that's a ninth chord. You got a major triad plus a major seventh plus a major ninth. C. I wonder where he gets this from. I'd say from. So lots of things are connected, and more so than I actually ever realized. So I love how he hints things at the A theme. And now we have a sequence. He's going to repeat that section, that B section that we just had. That B section that we just had. Again, we're kind of exploding on this lovely. Now we have a D, 7, 9th chord. Now this part's really fun, and this is a part, if you're learning the piece, you definitely practice. There's kind of cross-hand stuff going on here. Okay, so what's he doing with the rhythms? So he's taking this from this, and he's, adding a little, really, really quite nice. I see you have a comment from Ben Larish. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Jean and Terry. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We got 12 people here, so thanks again. I just love Gershwin. I think he really knows how to juggle the layering in this particular spot with these. Again, we're working with stepwise motion. And of course, this stuff, I think he gets from. You wouldn't notice it necessarily right away, but it's all about drawing the little connections, and you start to kind of see the truth of the music come to life there. So let's do this crosshand stuff again. I love how he creates kind of an alternate little reality to this. First, it's very digging in its heels, and then he has a more, kind of ethereal, I don't know, ethereal, I guess that's a good word. Wispy. And digging in its heels. And now something changes here. He's developing the rhythm. Dee-da-da-da-da. Remember? Good. Hey, Vicky. Bill and Vicky here for the show. Yes, it is a show. We're having a lot of fun so far. So he's developing the rhythm of now in a different way. Okay. And then what's the left hand doing? Of course, we have all these, again, these kind of wavering half steps. Half steps are so important, especially with this jazz harmony that we're dealing with, because it almost is kind of sending us over the edge here. In the meantime, like I said, developing that kind of rhythmical pattern of the dee da 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 bum. So what do we have if we put them together? Okay. Now, if you didn't have that scale to kind of propel us forward, right? What would it sound like? Let's see. Again, it's nice, it works, but there's something about, you know, that thrilling scale going up, pushing us forward to, you know, really look up towards the sky. Yeah. Okay. Now, where did that rhythm come from? Dee da dum ba bum. I think it's somewhat related to. Except now he's adding a little bit of extra excitement with the it's almost like he does that, but instead he goes. So it's propelling us forward a little bit more. There's even more of that syncopation. Yata, data, papa, papa. And these wonderful chords. We have a lot of D major, C minor, A minor, and then we have a nice we have a seventh. There's another ninth chord. We have these juicy ninth chords. He's going through a lot of different harmony there, so that also accelerates the feeling of what's going to happen. Now he's building it up to going back to the A section. Let's see how he does that. All right, now if you're learning this piece, definitely want to practice this page. Some of these stretches in the left hand, I was just working with one of my friends from piano at Peabody on this very piece. And on the last page, when you have these left hand stuff, those are all, my hand's not that big, so I can't reach that roll very well. So I kind of, I cheat a little bit on the second of each of those just to make it a little easier so I can get that syncopation. So I leave off the E flat for the second of each of those. Because you're also having to worry about, and also if you're working on this piece, practice the pinky finger. Because the thumb does better on its own with the 1/1s, but the 5/5s, a little bit more difficult. So that's just a little practice tip if you're working on this piece. But he's certainly fleshing out this a little more before we had, you know. Now he's adding octaves. And adding these wonderful little runs. And so he's definitely doing a lot more. And so he's building us up to this A section. And similar to what he did with that, he's adding more with the syncopation. Instead of, you know. It's still exciting, but there's something about the yata, yata that really emphasizes, you know. Again, digging in its heels a little bit more. Now he's covering a really big stretch of the keyboard here. Yeah. So 1, 2, 3. That's a lot of octaves there. Again, it's 4 octaves technically. Yeah. That's another thing to practice if you're working on this piece. And then we have. Now, there's a really cool device that he's using right now called rhythmical augmentation, where he's doubling the size of the notes themselves. So instead of going, he's going. Now, that's more than twice as long because these are actually 30-second notes, and then he transforms them, augments them into eighth notes. Okay, so. So it's almost like he's trying to really point it out. These are the intervals, right? Well, you have the left hand doing the don't really to remember when he had this stuff. So again, he's connecting material that we had before, and that's actually from the B section to the A section, which I think is really quite remarkable. And then we have what I call train tracks, and I'll try to put the score up to the, if you can see the little dash things there, I call them train tracks. And that means to kind of stop in your tracks, right? And wait, and then I love what he does here. Kind of out of nowhere. We don't really hear anything like that before, so that's I think that's for effect. You know, just a scale going up and there in fourths. Not really all that interesting sounding by themselves, but when you put it in context, it gives it a really cool rush. And then he really surprises you. And it's funny, he doesn't make a crescendo going up to the B flat, but instead he makes it a diminuendo. So he starts forte, and it's almost like it just disappears. And with that, you know, it's a pretty big jump there. So that's definitely another part you want to practice if you're working on this particular piece. So that's our first movement, or first of the three preludes, although it stands, I'd say, very well on its own. And just thinking about classical sonata form, usually the first movement is kind of allegro. We'd say this is allegro. The second movement's typically going to be slow. Well, what do we have here for prelude number 2? A very slow, beautiful piece. I'm going to read the comments here. Very cool. Rhythmic. I think rhythm often brings a sense of increased majesty and climax. Rhythmic diminution often brings increased urgency and tension. Oh, lots of that in the piece. Yes, Gershwin certainly, well, he wrote, you know, did that variations on I Got Rhythm, right? So I think he had rhythm. I think he looks like he has rhythm. So the rhythm in this piece, though, is very different for the second prelude. He starts off with boring old quarter notes. All right, and it's 4 measures of this stuff. So let's just take a listen. I hope you haven't fallen asleep yet. Okay, yes, that's really hard to kind of pull off if you're performing this piece. Let's take a look what he's doing with the harmony. First of all, you have kind of a 1-5, 1-5 going on here. If we're in C sharp minor, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5. So that's not all that interesting by itself, but then we have these half steps that are kind of, they're not very dizzying, but we're kind of swaying just a little bit, right? I like to bring that out when I play the piece. And I do kind of a little diminuendo to set the stage for our melody, or is it a melody? Okay, so that's sort of our A section. Now let's think about how the melody begins. Thirds, more thirds, 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 fourths, thirds, fourths, thirds. That, not very interesting, those 2 intervals all by themselves. So what is he trying to capture here? It's almost like at the end of the day, you just kind of want to relax. You have to kind of settle in first, and maybe your mind's all over the place. So this is almost sort of a centering kind of beginning to the piece. And when you have this kind of wavering 1-5-1-5 pattern going, the combination is, there's your first statement, another statement, and then it's like, stay a while, you know. you do have a difference, it makes a bigger deal out of it, which is pretty interesting. Nice little grace note tossed in there, and then it starts to kind of go outside of its box a little bit. And I call this the kind of take a deep breath phrase, because it goes up and then it kind of exhales. Breathing in, and then it rests on C sharp. Now he's going to use the same intervals, but he changes one thing. Instead of... And I really love that change, because it was so much of the same kind of interval before. When we do have the second now going up, it's like, oh wow, that's really different. He cuts it off there when we thought it would go. He kind of takes our breath away a little bit and kind of shows us, wait, hold on, I got something better for you. Wait. And then he paints it in such a different light. It's very deep. It's the bass, you know. But we're still in the same key. You know, it's that kind of relax, you know. I love this part. I guess we call this A1 because it's not exactly the same as before. We have this nice, which is connected to. Plus, we have the octaves in a higher range in the piano, which is it's quite beautiful. They kind of sparkle a little bit more than. Now he's adding some really delicious chords instead of just. Now we have beautiful. What we have going on here now, we're pivoting to a new key. We're going to go to F sharp here. How did he do that? Here's our C sharp. Now we're doing a little dominant seventh action leading into B section. Back to A. So what's going on with that B section there? Very interesting. When we talk about the tempo, the piece is originally andante con moto e poco rubato. All right, so andante comes from the Italian word andare, meaning to walk, so walking speed, con moto, with motion, e poco, a little rubato. Rubato comes from the Italian word, I think rubare, I believe it is, and meaning to steal, So rubato, you're kind of stealing time, so make sure if you steal a little bit, make sure you give something back. You don't want to do too much rubato. Notice he says poco. So he doesn't want you to go overboard, and one of the things I think that's important, you have to imagine you got like a jazz trio behind you, you got your drum set going, and that keeps... You know, you can do some interesting things with rubato in the right hand, but you don't want to do too much so that we can't recognize where the beat is at. And I think that's what we're hearing here with the, maybe that's the bass, or who's ever keeping track of the chords and the beat, I think. And then here's our soloist, you know. I think this is the most kind of improvisatory part, actually, I think, of the whole set of 3 preludes. It's not, from what I've studied so far of the piece, I haven't noticed a whole lot of connection with earlier portions of the piece, so it seems like a little bit of kind of a improvised riff or something, if you will. He certainly repeats elements within that B section, things like, you know, but I think he's really playing around with more improvisatory aspects at this point. He writes largamente con moto, so largamente, so, you know, largo doesn't actually mean slow, it actually means large, so it's kind of these, thinking about large beats. And it says you're supposed to kind of reverse the hands, so instead of right hand playing this, it would be the left hand, because, you know, the right hand's used to playing melodic material, but what does Dolores say? You make it look so easy. A lot of practice, Dolores. A lot of practice and a lot of good teachers, I'll tell you that. So this, you know, I'm dyslexic. It's a little harder for me. I used to play it reverse hands, but let's see. Now I'm playing it the wrong way. But anyway, I think it might have been sort of a way for him to look a little bit cooler. That's kind of my opinion, but take that with a grain of salt. So after we go through the B section, he slows down the harmonic rhythm a little bit. It's just thirds, and then also slows down the rhythm. Retardando. And then surprise, we think we're just settled on F sharp major. Now we have, dominant 7th chord, back to, and there we are. Now that wasn't there before, but first of all we had a little bit straighter. Now he's adding a little flirtation in there. There's our deep breath pattern. Now we have a surprise here. Okay, so instead of making it sort of mellow and mild there, we come from a big forte surprise here. With octaves. And then subito, suddenly piano. So maybe someone was trying to make a scene or something at the bar and just settle down, you know. And I love his change from dee-dum to dee-dum. Right? So major to minor. And then the very ending, I think we have an 11th chord here. And he doesn't leave it there. He adds 2 more notes. And really take your time, or I like to take my time waiting to play that last C sharp. I remember my teacher, Brian Gant, said, you need to wait longer, right? This is the last call at the bar, right? So he was always pushing me to wait, enjoy this ascending, and then wait for the C sharp. So that's the second of the 3 preludes. If we have time, let's see how we're doing. Yeah, I think we might have time to play all 3 if I get through the third one enough. Any comments? I'm just looking through the comments now on the second one. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, and it's so compact. It's sort of in ternary form, A1, B, back to A. I think you'd be good to have the score. Yes, yeah, definitely. I think I'll try to get the scores out. This one will be trickier because it's still copyright. It's still under copyright, which is a bummer. but maybe there's a way we can figure that out for next time. Yeah, I don't. 1926. I think Warner Publications still owns the copyright for this, which is kind of weird. You wouldn't think that Time Warner would own the publications to Gershwin. So that's our second one. Our third one, I just love this one. I think this is the so-called Spanish Prelude. Some people call it the Spanish Prelude. Could be because of this jagged, spicy rhythm that we got at the beginning here. He writes Allegro ben ritmato e deciso, so it means quickly, with rhythm and decisively, okay? And we get that right away. Talk about setting the stage, right? The curtain goes right out, okay? So we have this yata, ta 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 tam. Definitely, we got that syncopation in there. And we also have, these lovely half steps. And then bigger step. So we're building up to. So that would be part of a diminished chord there, but almost it's kind of functioning as a dominant seventh in a way. There's your dominant seventh, but you have a diminished ninth going on there. My jazz friends can correct me in the comments. And so that's leading us into E flat minor. By the way, 6 flats, that's a lot of fun, right? So that's another reason I think that this is not the easiest kind of music to play. First move was a little easier, but E flat minor. So here's our theme. All right, so 2 identical little patterns we got going in there. Too many flats. Yeah, too many flats. Yeah, right. Thank you, Ben. Yeah, there are a lot of flats there. I think he had his reasons. Not many pieces are in E flat minor when you think about it. So this is one of the rare ones. Our melody. I love the diversity in the rhythm. We have a triplet 16th followed by 3 16ths, and then an 8th, and then another 16th, and then he holds the C. But it feels rather natural, right? Very rhythmical. And the left hand is doing. So this stuff comes from. So he's hearkening back to the beginning. I have 2 copies of the score. Can't find either one in all my sheet music. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Gene. Maybe we'll send you a copy. So I love how he harkens that back to the beginning. And it's when the left hand is held on that C, so it gives it a lot of spice. The only difference between these two is that instead of going, he inverts it. And the left hand is on G natural instead of G flat. Goes back. Okay, so this is what I call sort of the B section. Again, very, got a lot of musical rhymes here. So instead of the syncopation on the third, he smooths it out instead of he doesn't do that. And I think he's enjoying bringing out this lovely parallel sixth. Okay. If he kept that syncopation, it's a little too piquant or something in a way. So I like. And then he adds this. It's kind of funny all of a sudden. Where does that come from? And you're supposed to fit it into like one beat, basically. I've played it a lot of different ways, but I remember I had a master class with Stuart Goodyear, who's a really wonderful Gershwin interpreter. And I used to play this part like this, which I still kind of like, but he said, Gershwin didn't write anything about changing the rhythm there. So he suggested I make it kind of a little zap, like, ha, gotcha. So it sounds more like, maybe you guys can comment which one you like better. I like them both, so I don't know. It's a tough call there. But he goes back to our theme. I love the difference what he does here. For one thing, the left hand, very atmospheric. In the right hand, he suddenly writes these lovely octave higher lines. So I tend to do a little bit more with the kind of pulling it back a little bit so you can kind of hear the, Vicky says, I love the zappy one. Yeah, the zappy one. I kind of like that too. But this part's not very zappy. I kind of like to paint it in a more kind of sensual light, And then it jumps back into something different. So we have kind of parallel things going on there. Same kind of material, he repeats. We call this maybe the C section. Oops, get my Adobe Flash Player. Does that ever pop up for you guys? It's doing that for me. So what is he doing here? We have a walking bass line. So I like to kind of bring out how it's getting more and more intense. The right hand's doing a lot of, here's the chords. And he's using intervals of a sixth plus a third. Brahms likes to use those in the D minor concerto, which is my favorite piano concerto of all time by Brahms. He loves to use this interval of a sixth and a third. Maybe that's why I like this spot so much. I really try to kind of ham it up on the second time around with it. And listen to that chord. It is juicy. I love it. So feel free to take your time on that. I think Gershwin probably would have approved. Hopefully he would have approved. But I really think it's important also to keep bringing that bass line. And you have two shots at it. So the second time you could bring that out more. So where does he get the triplet sixteenths from? Probably, I think he's hearkening back to those. So we have these sudden little. And it could also have something to do. This is just something I thought of now. Maybe it could also do with, I think it's the same kind of harmony. This is what happens. I do these things and I start to, I didn't see that before. That's why I like doing them. See, you all help me. That's always a little creepy there. You don't really know what's going on. He kind of stays with this. I play it down here. It's a pretty freaky little harmony there, and he kind of keeps us there. What's going to happen after that octave shred? We're going back to A, but we're going to call it A1 because he adds a bunch of crazy octaves here, and the left hand's going. I'll talk about how you can practice those in a minute, but here's what we have. So that's how that piece ends. A few good ways you can practice this if you're doing this. The left hand, just practice 2 of those fifths at a time. There's only 1/6 in there. Sounds kind of like a heartbeat. And then you can do the opposite. And That's a good way to practice that. And then this stuff is just really tough. You really gotta divide and conquer. That's what I tell my students: divide and conquer. And then the very last part, it's supposed to be played with all the same, but I don't always get that last E flat up here. So I tend to be a little more careful sometimes. So I kind of, we call placing that last note. I tend to do that sometimes. But you can see that it's set up in such a way as almost like a classical sonata, you know, quicker and then slow movement and then really zappy last movement there. So I think we got enough time to play through all three preludes for you. I think I got these mostly memorized, so we're just gonna go ahead and put the music down over here, and then maybe put the music rack down, which I like to do. And here are Gershwin's 3 piano preludes, especially for all of you.